Commander Vex'tar adjusted his 4 eyes with growing annoyance as he watched the newest batch of cadets shuffle into the training arena. The Galactic Military Academy prided itself on accepting students from across the known systems, but honestly, some species just weren't cut out for real combat. Another human, he muttered under his breath, his mandibles clicking with distaste. What's that, the 5th one this cycle? The creature in question stood barely shoulder-high to most other cadets, her pale skin already flushed from the arena's standard atmospheric conditions. Humans called her kind redheads, though Vex'tar failed to see how orange counted as red in any civilized spectrum analysis. She wore the standard cadet uniform, looking ridiculously oversized on her small frame. Cadet Nora Flynn, he read from his data pad, pronouncing each syllable with theatrical precision. From Sol 3. Terra. Earth. He paused dramatically. Another Deathworlder, folks. Everyone give our newest recruit a warm welcome. The sarcasm dripped from his words like acid from a Zephyrian war slug. Several cadets from more civilized worlds snickered appropriately. The Quranian delegation practically purred with amusement. Their species had evolved past crude humor, but apparently not past enjoying it. Nora Flynn, to her credit, didn't flinch. She simply stood there, green eyes scanning the arena with what Vex'tar could only describe as casual interest. Not fear, not excitement, interest. Like she was evaluating real estate. Now, Vex'tar continued, pacing before the assembled group, today we're conducting standard sparring exercises. Nothing fancy, nothing lethal, much to everyone's disappointment, I'm sure. More clicks of amusement from the crowd. Partner selection is random, as always. The holographic display flickered to life above the arena floor, cycling through names and faces before settling on the matches. Vex'tar's own heart sank slightly as he read the first pairing. Cadet Flynn vs. Cadet Thorax'nin. Oh, this was going to be ugly. Thorax'nin stood nearly 3 meters tall, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the arena lights. The sectoid warrior had earned his place at the academy through sheer brutal efficiency. His homeworld's entrance exam consisted of hunting apex predators with nothing but natural weapons. His 4 arms rippled with muscle that could crush steel beams, and his compound eyes held the cold calculation of a born killer. The human looked like a snack he might eat between meals. Wonderful, Vex'tar announced with false enthusiasm. Our Deathworlder gets to dance with someone who actually deserves the title. Begin when ready. The 2 cadets moved to the center of the arena. Thorax'nin cracked his knuckles, all 16 of them, with sounds like breaking branches. His mandibles spread wide in what passed for a smile among his kind, revealing rows of serrated cutting teeth. Small human, he buzzed in accented galactic standard, perhaps you would prefer to yield now? Save yourself the medical bills? Nora Flynn tilted her head slightly, studying him with those unsettling green eyes. When she spoke, her voice carried a musical quality that somehow made the words more ominous rather than less. You know, she said conversationally, back home, we have these things called praying mantises. Beautiful creatures. All arms and attitude. She began stretching, touching her toes with casual flexibility. Course, they're only about this big. She held up her thumb and forefinger. But the principle's the same, isn't it? Thorax'nin's compound eyes shifted, processing this strange response. Around the arena, other cadets leaned forward. This wasn't the usual pre-combat banter they expected from a terrified Deathworlder. Your insects are irrelevant, human, Thorax'nin replied, dropping into a combat stance that had been refined over millennia of warfare. I will make this quick. Oh, I hope so, Nora said cheerfully, bouncing lightly on the balls of her feet. I've got xenobiology homework after this, and Professor Kelthak gets cranky when essays are late. The casual dismissal hit Thorax'nin like a physical blow. His species prided themselves on inspiring appropriate fear in lesser creatures. This soft, pink thing was treating him like an inconvenience, with a roar that shattered 3 light fixtures. Thorax'nin charged. Vex'tar had seen sectoid combat before. It was like watching a natural disaster with strategy. 4 arms moving in perfect coordination, each strike capable of pulverizing bone, the massive frame moving with surprising speed across the arena floor. Thorax'nin was a living weapon, honed by evolution and training into something that could tear through most opponents like wet paper. The human should have been paced within seconds. Instead, something impossible happened. Nora Flynn moved, not the desperate scrambling Vex'tar expected from a terrified prey animal, but with a fluid grace that made his optical organs hurt to track. She slipped under Thorax'nin's first strike, spun around his second, and somehow ended up behind him while he was still processing where she'd gone. "Huh," she said, sounding genuinely pleased. "You are quick. This might actually be fun." Thorax'nin spun, all 4 arms lashing out in a pattern that should have caught her from every angle. Instead, Nora dropped into what humans called a baseball slide, passing between his legs while delivering a sharp elbow strike to the back of his left knee joint. The sound Thorax'nin made wasn't quite a roar and wasn't quite a scream. It was something new and horrible, the sound of a predator suddenly realizing it might be prey. He stumbled, his perfect balance disrupted, and Nora was already moving again. "See, the thing about really big opponents," she said, apparently conducting a lecture while avoiding death by millimeters, "is that all that reach comes with built-in blind spots." She ducked under another swipe, this one close enough that her hair fluttered in the wind. "Plus, square cube law is a real pain, isn't it?" Vex'tar's mandibles hung open. Around the arena, cadets from dozens of species watched in stunned silence as the human continued her impromptu physics lesson while systematically dismantling a sectoid warrior. "Mass increases faster than bone density," Nora continued, now running up Thorax'nin's own arm like it was a ramp. "Larger creatures need proportionally more energy to move, more oxygen to function, more everything, really." She reached his shoulder and delivered a precise strike to what Vex'tar suddenly realized she'd identified as a nerve cluster. "But humans? We're persistence hunters. We're built for efficiency." Thorax'nin's right arms went limp. The crowd gasped collectively. "Impossible," someone whispered. "She's just a Deathworlder." "Just?" Nora called out cheerfully, apparently having heard the comment while hanging from a 3-meter-tall warrior's neck. "Friend, do you know what the death rate is on our planet?" She swung around to Thorax'nin's back, her legs wrapping around his torso. "Everything there is trying to kill us. The weather, the animals, the plants, the microbes, sometimes even the rocks." Thorax'nin reached back with his remaining functional arms, trying to grab the human who was apparently giving a nature documentary while conducting asymmetric warfare. His movements were becoming slower, more desperate. "So we got good at not dying," Nora said, applying what Vex'tar recognized as a textbook chokehold. "Really, really good. Embarrassingly good, some might say." The sectoid warrior's struggles grew weaker. Around the arena, absolute silence had fallen. This wasn't just an upset, this was a fundamental challenge to everything they understood about combat, about power, about the natural order of things. "Yield?" Nora asked politely. Thorax'nin's response was a gurgle that might have been agreement. She released him immediately, dropping to the ground with cat-like grace as the massive warrior collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath. Nora straightened her uniform, checked her chronometer, and looked around the arena with those unsettling green eyes. "Well," she said brightly, "that was invigorating. Who's next?" The silence stretched for exactly 12 seconds before complete chaos erupted throughout the arena. Vex'tar's data pad slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering against the metal floor with a sound like breaking dreams. "Medical team to Arena 7, he heard himself saying into his communicator, though his voice sounded distant and hollow. "We have a situation." Around the arena, cadets from a dozen different species were talking all at once. The Coronian delegation had stopped purring and started what could only be described as aggressive hissing. 3 Zeltharian cadets had fainted outright, their species evolved from prey animals and apparently couldn't handle watching a predator get out-predated. That's impossible, whispered Cadet Jaxtu, a Rigelian whose people had conquered half their star system before joining the Galactic Federation. Humans are Class 7 Deathworlders at best. Sectoids are Class 12 warriors. Nora Flynn, meanwhile, had walked over to help Thorax'nin to his feet. The massive warrior was still breathing heavily, his compound eyes showing what Vex'tar now recognized as shock rather than pain. "You fight well," Thorax'nin managed, his translator crackling slightly from the damage to his throat. "Your technique is unorthodox." "Thanks." Nora replied cheerfully, steadying him with one small hand. "You've got incredible reach and power. Back home, you'd make a fantastic linebacker. Or possibly a construction crane." The sincerity in her voice seemed to confuse Thorax'nin more than the defeat had. "I do not understand these references," he admitted. "Oh, that's okay. Most aliens don't get our sports metaphors. Something about cultural context and evolutionary development patterns," she made air quotes with her fingers. "Personally, I think you're all just overthinking it." Vex'tar cleared his throat loudly, trying to regain some semblance of control over his classroom. "Yes, well, that was certainly educational. Perhaps we should move on to the next." "Actually," interrupted a new voice from the observation deck, "I think we should examine what just happened here." Every head in the arena turned upward. Standing at the rail was Professor Kethera, the Academy's leading expert in xenobiology and comparative anatomy. Her 6 eyes were fixed on Nora with an expression that might have been fascination or hunger. With arachnoid species, it was often hard to tell. "Professor," Vex'tar said quickly, his mandibles clicking with nervous energy. "I assure you this was just a training exercise. Nothing more than a complete revision of our understanding of human capabilities," Kethera interrupted smoothly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent centuries studying the galaxy's deadliest creatures. "Tell me, Cadet Flynn, what's your homeworld's gravity?" Nora looked up at the spider-like professor with obvious interest. "Earth standard is about 9.8 meters per second squared. Why? And this facility operates at standard galactic norm, which is 7.2 meters per second squared," Kethera continued, beginning to pace along the observation rail with that peculiar arachnoid grace. "Meaning you've been operating under conditions that are approximately 30% lighter than what your body expects." A murmur ran through the assembled cadets. Vex'tar felt his heart sink further. "Furthermore," the professor continued, clearly warming to her subject, "human muscle density is approximately 40% greater than the galactic average, and your bone structure shows clear adaptations for high-impact scenarios that would be lethal to most species." "Oh," Nora said, looking genuinely surprised. "Is that why everyone seems so fragile? I mean, no offense," she added quickly to Thorax'nin, who was still recovering nearby. "You're definitely not fragile. Just maybe not as robust as I expected." "No offense taken, small warrior," Thorax'nin replied with what might have been respect. "Though I am curious about these praying mantises you mentioned." Nora's face lit up with enthusiasm. "Oh, they're fascinating. See, they're ambush predators with incredible reaction times and these amazing compound eyes, kind of like yours, actually, and they can rotate their heads almost 300 degrees, and, Cadet Flynn," Professor Kethera called down, her voice carrying an unmistakable note of scientific hunger. "Would you be interested in participating in some additional research? I believe we may have significantly underestimated your species' capabilities." "Sure," Nora replied immediately. "Will it involve more sparring? Because honestly, that was the most fun I've had since arriving. Most of the combat simulations here are kind of gentle. Back home, we call that playing tag with your little sister." The arena fell silent again. Vex'tar realized his mouth was hanging open and closed it with a snap. "Gentle?" squeaked Cadet Yilfeth, a Centaurian whose homeworld was famous for producing pacifists and philosophers. Those simulations have a 15% injury rate. Really? Nora looked genuinely confused. What kind of injuries? Paper cuts? Bruised feelings? Broken bones, concussions, occasionally mild organ damage, Ylfeth replied faintly. Oh. Nora paused, processing this information. Well, that explains why everyone keeps asking if I need medical attention after training. I thought you were all just being really, really polite. Thorax'nin made a sound that might have been laughter if it hadn't been so terrifying. Human, what is considered normal training on your world? Well, depends on what you're training for, Nora said thoughtfully. Basic military preparation usually involves things like obstacle courses with live ammunition, hand-to-hand combat until someone yields or passes out, survival exercises in hostile environments. She ticked off items on her fingers. Oh, and psychological conditioning to function effectively while under extreme stress, sleep deprivation, and physical exhaustion. And this is normal? Vex'tar managed to croak. For military training, sure, Nora shrugged. Though my little brother's football team probably trains harder. American high school sports are pretty intense. Your children engage in combat sports? Professor Kethera called down, her scientific excitement now barely contained. Well, yeah. Football, wrestling, boxing, mixed martial arts, ice hockey. Nora paused. Wait, do you guys not have competitive sports? We have games, Ylfeth said weakly. Gentle games. With safety equipment. And medical supervision. And strict rules about contact. That sounds boring, Nora said with devastating honesty. Commander Vex'tar watched his carefully structured worldview continue to crumble around him. He'd spent decades training elite warriors from the galaxy's most dangerous species. He'd seen Thoranid berserkers tear through steel barriers with their bare claws. He'd watched Nethari assassins move like living shadows. He'd even survived a training session with a Krag heavy assault specialist. None of it had prepared him for a cheerful human teenager who treated galactic standard combat training like a warm-up exercise. Professor Kethera, he called up to the observation deck, perhaps we should continue this discussion in a more controlled environment? Absolutely, the professor agreed, her multiple eyes never leaving Nora. Cadet Flynn, would you join me in Laboratory 7 after your regular classes today? I believe we have a great deal to learn from each other. Sounds great. Nora said enthusiastically. Should I bring anything special? Just yourself, Kethera replied. And perhaps, any additional insights about human combat doctrine you might be willing to share. As the professor disappeared from the observation deck and the medical team finally arrived to check on Thorax'nin, who waved them off with obvious embarrassment, Vex'tar found himself staring at the human cadet with a mixture of horror and fascination. Cadet Flynn, he said slowly. Yes, sir. In the future, perhaps you could moderate your performance during training exercises? Nora looked genuinely confused. You want me to hold back? For the sake of morale, yes. She considered this for a moment, then shrugged. Sure, I can do that. Though it might be kind of boring. Boring is good, Vex'tar muttered under his breath. Boring is safe. As the cadets began to disperse, chattering excitedly about what they'd witnessed, Vex'tar made a mental note to revise the Academy's classification system for human cadets. Maybe bump them up from Class 7 Deathworlders to something more appropriate, like walking natural disasters with good manners. Behind him, he could hear Nora Flynn cheerfully asking Thorax'nin about his homeworld's combat techniques, apparently treating their recent battle as nothing more than an interesting cultural exchange. Vex'tar shuddered and went to find something strong to drink. He had a feeling he was going to need it.